In this video, I'll be going online like it's 1992. I'll be using the computer I built in a previous video. But what does going online even mean in this case? In 1992, the internet wasn't accessible to most people. The first ISP offering access to individuals in Sweden hadn't even come around yet. No, what the vast majority of regular people used their modems for was to call other computers. Specifically computers hosting a BBS. Unless you were one of those weirdos that got into the Telegard experiment, which was basically Minitel except Swedish. When the history of bulletin boards are talked about is usually limited to the publicly accessible ones. But that's too limited from a Swedish perspective. This story starts at the Stockholm Computer Central for Higher Education and Research, also known as QZ. It was a joint venture between Stockholm University, the Royal Institute of Technology, and the National Defense Research Institute. As the latter was about to be split up and spread out into 6 different locations, an idea was pitched for some kind of teleconferencing tool to aid the collaboration between the different units. In 1976, Forum Planet was brought in from the US, with the intention to deploy it at QZ. As the software was trialed and translated into Swedish, its limitations became apparent. Like that it only supported up to 255 messages per conference, or thread as we would call it today. This led to a new system being developed locally, the so-called COM system. The COM system was designed to run on QZ's PDP-10 mainframe. At its launch in 1978, snags were immediately encountered. The use of computers and the type of information they could store and process was strongly regulated by privacy legislation. This legislation was more or less written with the assumption that computers stored information about people, not that people stored information in computers. As a result, the COM system was prohibited from operating. In March 1979, the system opened again, initially with all messages posted anonymously to get around the privacy legislations. The system was mainly available to FOA personnel and the faculty from associated universities. In 1980, the ABC Club was formed. It was a club for ABC-80 microcomputer users. ABC-80 was a Swedish 8-bit computer, mostly known for being quite cheap, having the fastest BASIC on an 8-bit computer and being quite popular in the early 80s. That same year, trials started with the ABC Club opening up their own BBS. The BBS ran on an ABC-80 with a dual 8-inch floppy drive and a 300 baud modem. And the user interface? It was largely influenced by QZ's COM, and some would even call it a copy. Aside from hosting discussions, it also had a file area with programs for the ABC-80, mostly written in BASIC. The BBS was open to all members in January 1981, restricted from the public at large due to the large number of calls it received. In general, this is considered the first BBS in Sweden that was available to the general public. In 1982, the COM system over QZ got linked up with ARPANET email, allowing users to send ARPANET mail and participate in mailing lists. ARPANET is what the US Defense and Research Network was called, which would later become the Internet. These were early days, as the Internet protocol had not yet been deployed on ARPANET. At this point, it was also possible for mere mortals to buy computer time on QZ's PDP-10 mainframe, with a special discount available for the ABC Club if you only use the system at night. BBSs were mostly operated out of sight from the general public, most not being aware of their existence. One of the first mentions of these systems in Sweden in a mass media setting was on 9th December 1983. One of the headline news that day was how 2 teenagers broke into QZ, described as a secret military databank. They didn't even successfully get in, as they got kicked out of the system while brute-forcing a user's password. Given that you could just buy access to the system, it seems silly that they would run this kind of story, but what did you expect from a tabloid? It's noteworthy how this article describes them as trying to recreate what happened in the movie War Games, which had premiered in Sweden that day. Another BBS of note is Permobas. It was opened in mid-1984 and was sponsored by Permobil, a company most known for their electric wheelchairs. Permobil imagined it as a meeting place for people with disabilities. It quickly started growing, and Permobil was happy to sponsor it. To keep costs down, it was hosted across multiple ABC-80s with software written in BASIC. The user interface started out as a custom one, but it was quickly changed to be more like the existing COM systems. By 1985, Permobil had figured out that the vast majority of Permobas's users didn't actually have any disabilities and pulled the funding in late 1985. By then, the operators had already started working on a new BBS called Computex, which like Permobas had multiple phone lines. And Computex was hosted on a VAX 11, probably a 730 or 750. Rather naughtily, the old user register from Permobas was straight up copied over to Computex. Computex would run for the 80s and be among the largest BBSs in Sweden. The BBSs usually hosted conversation regarding all kinds of topics, and some users weren't even computer geeks. In a landmark court ruling, it was determined that the operator of a BBS was responsible for the content that was posted to her BBS. Legislation followed regarding what you can post in public forums, and it is still applied today. which is funny because even today it's known as the BBS law. In general, com-like systems have become more or less a de facto standard in Sweden. As the 80s progressed, many small BBSs sprung up, reaching towards the thousands by the start of the 90s. Many of them were hosted on underpowered home computers with floppy drives for storage, and occasionally cheap modems modified for automatic answer, with the occasional fire started by such modifications. Towards the early 90s, Amigas were also a popular choice. Some of these small BBSs had dedicated phone lines, while others were only available at night. The average lifespan of these small BBSs were usually quite short, many closing within a few years due to hardware failure. Another thing that took off in the second half of the 80s was FidoNet. FidoNet was and still is a hierarchical system for sending messages between users on different BBSs. And built on top of this was EchoMail, which allowed entire message bases to be synchronized between systems. This allowed conversations to span multiple BBSs. Many BBSs were connected to FidoNet, but certainly not all of them. And amongst all of this, pirate BBSs were definitely a thing, especially as modems got faster, but even a 2400 BPS modem was plenty for downloading C64 software. It was quite polarizing too, as the widespread software piracy taking place gave the BBS hobby a bad reputation, according to those that didn't partake in such activities. Of course, the best of these pirate BBSs were invite-only, also known as elite BBSs. Aside from piracy, that's where you'd find the activities of the scene in general. From the second half of the 80s and onwards, the scene would start diverging and splitting into a wares scene and a demo scene, but that's a story for another time. By the early 90s, the general public were quite aware of the bad things hosted on BBSs, but not really the good things about them. In just a bit, I'll show a BBS in action. It will be a menu-based system, where a single keystroke navigates a hierarchical menu system. Com-like systems had a command line in which all commands could be used at all times. The menu-based systems got more common in Sweden as the PC became more relevant in homes throughout the 90s. Until the early 90s, the PC was basically irrelevant for home users, as other home computers dominated. So for this video's demonstration, I've set up Telegard, a menu-based BBS system. I've kinda structured it to look like a closed BBS for use by a circle of friends. Another thing worth keeping in mind here is that calls were built based on geographic distance and time, so you'd really want to stick to local numbers if possible. But anyway, to call it up, I'm gonna need a modem. As someone first getting into the hobby, I got a cheap 2400 baud modem, specifically this Amstrad SM2400. It would have been a few years old at the time, so even cheaper if I got it used. To go online, I just need to connect the power, the serial port, and the phone line. Aside from the modem, I also need some software. I'll be using Telex, which was a popular choice back then. Setting up the modem just requires answering a few simple questions. Something's weird with my second COM port, so I'll be using COM1 in this video. During the filming of a later video using this modem, I figured out what a jumper was set incorrectly on the serial board. Next, I add the BBS to my dialing list. And after that, I can dial it up. Once the connection has been established, Telex plays this tune to let us know. This is because it's set up to retry dialing the number until it gets through. Many bulletin boards only had one phone line, meaning only one person could connect at a time. If it was a busy bulletin board, it could take hours to get through. I'm a new user, so first I'm registered an account. In modern times, it might seem a bit weird to just hand all of this information over to a random computer you just dialed, especially if you found it on one of those public lists. However, most boards required the system operator to validate you. It wasn't uncommon for the system operator to call you up and have a chat before letting you in. So not only would you hand all of this information over, the system operator is pretty sure to look at it, and they would see everything, including your password. Anyway, the registration concludes with a prompt to write a letter to the sysop, explaining why we deserve access. We are then let in right away. There is however not a whole lot we can do right now. so I'll call back later when we're validated. Okay, so I've been validated now, so let's log in and have a look around. So first off from the main menu, let's head into the file section. As we can see, there's a number of file areas to choose from. Let's go into games. Everybody likes games. Let's see if there's anything to download. So there is something called Scorched Earth here. However, it has not yet been validated, so I'm not allowed to download it. Anyway, I got something to upload, so let's do that in the meantime. First, I need to provide a file name, so I need to remember what I'm uploading. That is then followed by a description that will be shown to other users. That way, they know what it is. I choose Z modem as the protocol, since that's pretty much the only option you'd want to use. I then get the go ahead to start the upload, so I hit the transmit menu in Telex and select Z modem, as well as the file I want to upload. And after that, the file is uploading. I can't really do anything else when it's uploading, so it's all a waiting game. Once again, when the upload is complete, Telex plays a little melody, letting me know that it's done. Now that we've seen the file section, let's look at that poll. I think I can guess who the outlier is. Anyway, let's get into the heart of the BBS and read some messages. Since I'm new here, I'm just scanning through all of the messages. Let's write a message telling Arne to validate those damn files. Apparently there's a message in this other base. Let's just post something referring to the file I just uploaded. Time bank is just a way to save some online time for later. Usually, you will limit it to a certain amount of time per day, as users want to hog the line. Now, let's check out the game that is installed on this BBS, Legend of the Red Dragon. This is a text-based RPG with some basic interaction between players. We start with a stick, a coat, and 500 gold. First, let's check out the weapon store. I can't afford anything. Let's check out the armor store. Again, I can't afford anything. Let's head out into the forest and beat something up. Okay, so let's just heal up for now. Okay, so I got the money for a new weapon. Let's go get that. Doesn't seem like I can do anything at the warrior training yet. I feel confident now. Let's beat up Arne. Okay, that didn't go too well. Let's heal up and do something else. Like checking out the inn. Uh-oh. Violet. I'm too awkward for this. I need to get out of here. We've pretty much seen everything at this point, so I'll log out. I'll call back later when Arne's validated the files. Okay, I'm back. Let's get that file. As we request the download, Telex will automatically detect the Z modem transfer and start it up for us. It will helpfully dump it straight into the directory we ran Telex from. And with that, I think I've shown pretty much everything worth showing here, so I'll log right off again. While bulletin boards were one of the more popular services to call into, you could also log into other computers remotely. Here I'm just logging into my modern laptop, but in a future video I might show how to remotely log into an MS-DOS machine like you do back in the day. In a previous video, I said we'll look at terminal in Windows later. I guess that's now. The settings here include terminal type, basic preferences around its behavior, communication protocol for file transfer, note here that it only supports X modem and Kermit, then the communication parameters, and modem setup. So let's dial into the BBS. The dialing dialog looks similar to the one in Telex. Note that no colors or advanced control codes are supported. Scrolling is also quite laggy. Since X modem is a less sophisticated protocol, I have to manually tell terminal to start the file download. Unlike in Telex, I could theoretically do something else in Windows, but you really want a good serial control for that, or you could miss bytes and get transmission errors. While quite basic and a bit clunky, it's perfectly serviceable if you don't have anything else. But I think that'll do for this video. Check back next week when I'll be trying to use Linux for productivity. As always, thank you for watching.